So good evening or good afternoon, everybody. My name's Stephen Pincock, and as you just heard, I'm from a publisher called Springer Nature. We're lucky enough to be part of the Knowledge Quarter here. We sit about 5 minutes walk away from here. Across the road is Google. DeepMind is around the corner. We've got UCL, the Crick, the British Library, the Wellcome, all within walking distance, and we are really aware of what a vibrant place London is for medical research and the interpretation and translation of that into something that's going to help patients. So I'm very happy to be here and talking to these eminent folks. As you have just heard, London is at the epicenter of what is promising to be a transformative period in our history. 19, I'll just read some of these numbers out for you. 19 of the world's top 20 global pharmaceutical companies are based here. 4 world-leading city-based life sciences clusters. We're sitting in one of them right now. 32 highly functioning NHS trusts. So much potential for collaboration, innovation, medical research that's going to change lives. So what I'd like to start with is by asking each of the panelists here to just remind us who you are and give us a sense of what role you play in this ecosystem. So let's start right here.
I've got,
You've got one.
No, lovely to meet you all. Thank you for coming this evening. So I'm James Ruffell. I have the opportunity to wear 2 hats. I work as a consultant neuroradiologist at the big hospital. Many of you may have walked past UCH on your way in, but I also work at one of the artificial intelligence labs at UCL Institute of Neurology, predominantly focusing on the development and use of AI applications in brain tumours and other sort of brain imaging platforms.
Great. Good evening. I'm Dr. Rosie Godazeth. I'm Medical Director at Genomics. My background is as a clinician. I was a clinician for 10 years in the NHS, specialising in cardiology. So I work for a science-led global biotech company, and we use large-scale genetic data, health data, AI with some proprietary analytics to really accelerate drug discovery, drug development, and from the healthcare side, really leading in prevention and prediction of disease.
Hello there, good evening. My name's Jo Mills. Yesterday was a big day for me because I joined the Francis Crick Institute to head up something called KQ Labs, which is all about accelerating data-driven health innovation. We've talked a little bit already about who the Francis Crick Institute is, but me personally, I have a background in supporting entrepreneurship. I joined, having recently spent about 20 or so years at the interface of industry and academia, supporting entrepreneurship in Cambridge at the Wellcome Sanger Institute and University of Cambridge, and really focusing on looking that entrepreneurial potential in the scientists to enable science to benefit society.
I've got I think it's working. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Peter Bloomfield. Again, very new to a role. I started last Monday at Moorfields Eye Charity, which is the funder of research and innovation for the hospital and the Institute of Ophthalmology at UCL. I've worked in and around the Knowledge Quarter for most of my career. And that's from an academic perspective at UCL, through AI acceleration for startups at Digital Catapult, just over the road. And then I've also developed human-computer interface technology and worked on health policy as well. So it's kind of, this discussion is hopefully something that I can contribute to.
I'm sure you can. So you're really at the cutting edge here. Everybody's brand new in their jobs almost, which is great. The ecosystem that we're talking about here starts with an idea in somebody's mind and maybe some data that they've observed, goes through a development process, becomes something that they test, and then eventually ends up being something that can change lives. And I think you each span parts of that journey. So before we get into talking about patients, I wonder if we can start, Jo, with you and KQ Labs. Could you give us a sense of how that works and what are some of the organizations that are in the current cohort for KQ Labs?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So KQ Labs was formed back in 2018 by the innovation and business team at the Francis Crick Institute, and particularly the leads of translation and an entrepreneur in residence there, a lady called Dr. Barbara Domain-Heyman. And what they were noticing at the time was that really biomedical science and AI were beginning to converge and new ideas were being formed. But actually the early stage companies were really struggling. And there was a need really to nurture them, even though springing up around this part of London and in the Knowledge Quarter, you had the arrival of Google DeepMind and some of these organizations, the hospitals, research institutes that we've already talked about. The folks at the Crick tell me that at that point in time, two things were happening. One, a lot of the organizations were perhaps not speaking together and interacting as much as they perhaps could. And even the investors in that space, formed two separate tribes. The investors who invested in biotech, who were really unsure about AI and what it meant and couldn't really identify with it. And the investors in technology and partly AI, who perhaps didn't understand the science and the life cycles and the cycles of developing, scientific products is much longer than those for technology. So there was a challenge. So KQ Labs was really formed to try and address that challenge and build and nurture the companies, the small companies that would then generate and begin to form an ecosystem around us in this space. So over 8 years, KQ Labs is now on its 8th cohort of participants. Each year, 10 companies are selected to be supported through the program. The companies are all at a very early stage. They may have raised some seed funding, typically around, well, on average around £300,000, so not a huge amount to really get underway. They will have had some data, proved a concept, and perhaps be starting to engage with clinics and patients and so on to start testing their ideas. So really the program takes them from that very early stage to raising a more significant seed round by building around them a program of activity, a supportive mentoring environment, of real specialists. KQ Labs has developed a group of community of around 200 or so mentors and another 200 or so investors. So really facilitating introductions to those investors. To tell you a little bit about some of the companies that have actually spanned the cohorts across the 8 years, they really fall into 3 different groups. Firstly, they are companies where AI is helping to support the drug discovery and development process. So that might span anything from helping to identify drug targets all the way through to helping to eliminate some of the challenges of clinical trials. So, for example, one of the big successes from KQ Labs over recent years has been a company called Linda's Health. They had a significant fundraise announced early last year of something like $55 million. And they are really trying to, they're sort of almost the anti-clinical research organization, if you like, trying to really abolish the need for some of the complexity out of that. The second bucket of companies really fall under precision medicine. So that's using things like imaging and genomics and other tools to really enable much more precision diagnostics and helping to stratify patients and actually target patients with the right kind of therapies that will work for them. So there's a couple of interesting examples. One that comes from Queen Square, so Queen Square Analytics, which is really focusing on neurology and particularly applications around multiple sclerosis and using those for diagnostics. Another one from the Eye Hospital as well, a company called Eye2Gene, which are on the current cohort of KQ Labs, who are also in that space for ophthalmology issues. And then the third set of companies really fall into the more direct patient or clinical interactions. So one example is a company from a cohort a few years ago now called Neurovert, and they have an extended reality, virtual reality solution to help patients with rehabilitation from strokes and other neurological disorders. So those are the kinds of companies. All of the companies, without exception, have real deep scientific underpinnings. So everything is underpinned by research. What I should say is not every company is a spin out from a research institute. Some have actually been driven by clinicians, and others have actually been driven by patients or people who have real live patient-focused experiences and really want to drive solutions for the better. So it's a really interesting mix of people and ideas that are on the programme.
Thank you for that. Can I just follow up briefly? Because I think when you say the word company, people often think of corporations, right? These are not, this is like a couple of folks sometimes, right?
This is literally a couple of folks. These are a couple of folks, imagine them, scientists who has come from research. It might be, somebody who's a postdoctoral scientist, so a young scientist, perhaps with a supervisor. They may have a collaborator from perhaps industry or from a clinical background, and that will probably be it. None of them will be full-time at this point in time, or maybe one if they've raised some funding. So yes, we're talking really small.
And this is the first barrier that they need to overcome to get something to change people's lives is, okay, I found something out. I've got an idea. How do I make that into an organization that goes out there into the world?
Absolutely, and it's a seriously long pathway. The pathway begins perhaps with actually validating that science. Will a piece of science work for the solution for the patient issue that I'm trying to address? And that's often very different science to validate that to the science that they would have underpinned, conducted as a researcher. So that's the first thing. Getting funding to do that proof of concept work is hard. Getting the access to the patient samples is also a challenge. So yeah, start of a very long pathway, and that's before we've even thought about who the customers are, what the business model is, how to market it, how to fund it, and all of those other issues.
Yeah, great. Well, welcome to the job.
Thank you very much.
Peter, can I turn to you, because I think I don't know whether this is exactly the next step along the journey. Possibly it's a similar process, right? But talk to me about digital twins, which sounds like a very cool idea. What do they mean?
Absolutely. And I mean, so the job I've just started is new, but ophthalmology and eye research is I've been doing that a little while now. And I think the concept of digital twins and having models of organs and systems and a whole range of different aspects of health can touch that chain multiple times, and it's something that can be academically and research exciting, but then also for the development of new things, and then also reaching patients in the clinic. There are multiple stages that this technology can be really exciting for. So the work that I've been doing is with something called the Virtual Eye Initiative. And I don't want to get too academic and nerdy with it, but we have a really exciting paper coming out later this year that sets out the biological features and the foundations of the model that enables a simulation of the eye in health and disease. And the idea is basically you have this simulation of the eye that you can then use to better understand, well, three things really. One is what we do or don't know about the eye in the first place. So if there are gaps for your modeling, you can go out and do the research to close that gap and create a better model and a better simulation. You can then use that simulation to relate directly to individual patients through their retinal image and the rest of their eye data and eventually their health data. And from there, you can then take it for clinical application and say, okay, this is the treatment that this person should be on. Here's a lifestyle program for them, and this is what they need to consider for their own health. And then the third element is that it can also be a discovery modality. So what would be the best treatment for a particular condition? What biomarkers are there or what clusters of biomarkers are there that we can design much better, more specific treatments through? So it's a really exciting technology that draws on lots of different other technologies. That's not just AI based. It's creating all-encompassing models that have rules, as well as using much more open techniques. And I really think that having not just ones of these for specific organs, but linking up all of those organs to create a human digital twin that then all of us can benefit from in our different domains, and then ultimately patients and society have a much better outcome.
I think it's quite hard to conceptualize what it is you're really talking about here. People might think a digital twin is a virtual body or something. Can you describe it a little more?
Yeah. So I think, well, that really is it. It's a virtual representation of the patient, and through that representation, you can get that patient the treatment plan that they need. It's based on the data of thousands, if not millions, of patients at the end of the day, but creating a simulation of a human that you can use as a template for all other humans is incredible, and could be really powerful for the future.
All right, Rosie, I can see you've got your hands up.
I am. You can see me excited about digital twins. So genomics is quite unusual because it's static, it's stable, it doesn't change. Your genetics are your genetics. And with common diseases, we have a genetic element, and then we have lifestyle. So if I said to everyone in the audience, could I have examples of lifestyle things we should do to make ourselves healthy? Somebody would say smoking, someone would say eat healthily, someone would say exercise. The idea of a digital twin in genomics is I could take you and run your genetics, and then I could take you and run yours, and I could give you each your digital twin and tell you what lifestyle changes would impact your trajectory of your individual journey. So it gives that individual a real image of their personal health status at that time. So the genetics is stable, but the lifestyle changes are dynamic. Because if you smoke right now, let's say you have a high genetic risk of heart disease and you're smoking, that's higher risk. But you've now stopped smoking and you're eating healthily. So that trajectory for your digital twin will change. And I'm sure we can all say, back to that individual patient experience and an individual doctor, as a cardiologist, the amount of times I said to a patient, stop smoking, stop drinking, exercise more, control your stress, don't forget to work. It's too much, right? So I think the digital twin is a beautiful way to allow patients to see their journey, the what if scenario, and take steps one at a time.
Can I ask either of you, is this a reality now? Are digital twins a thing in the system?
In the healthcare system, there are rudimentary ones. There are digital twins that exist in other domains already that are used every single day. So in manufacturing and engineering, digital twins are commonplace, and particularly for things like condition monitoring and looking at kind of manufacturing of very expensive large-scale equipment. So aeroplanes, kind of equipment for medical facilities, they're all manufactured using this technology. The application in healthcare is in its relatively early phases, but so even in January this year, some work through this initiative mapped out different disease processes and created simulations of them in eye disease that you could visualize on the screen. So it's moving forward very rapidly, constantly, and it's kind of month by month, we're seeing new technology come forward in this space.
Okay, thanks. We'll come back, I think, later to barriers that might be in the place for some of these innovations to be really transforming the way patients are treated. But let's move on to something that is happening right now, which is, James, I'm interested to hear a little bit about the work that you're involved in with AI and imaging. Now, the past couple of years, people have got very excited about generative AI. This is a slightly different version of that. So maybe explain exactly what you're referring to when you talk about AI, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. So with my two hats on, I suppose as a clinician, I have to think as a radiologist, if I'm looking at images on a day-by-day basis, making a decision on what diagnosis it is, has this patient got a tumor? Is it getting smaller? Is it getting larger? Have they got a stroke? And so on. These are all computer vision tasks, or would be referred to in the AI space. And this is very much what has perhaps been the first point of call for AI in healthcare. I mean, we were maybe 10 years ago now, we had Jeff Hinton famously at one of our radiology societies say, in 5 years' time, all radiologists will be out of a job because AI will have replaced them. And yet as this kind of supposed ship was sinking, I still leapt into it and chose to study radiology. And I think that is because there is a clear path to massive gains with this technology in an imaging-based system. And indeed, we see that empirically, in the US, it's over 1,000 FDA now cleared devices for AI in healthcare. Nearly all of them are for radiology. It is true, the other sectors are catching up, but the leader by some majority has been imaging. The brain being a particularly interesting and important testing pit because whilst we are all different, of course, we are all unified that our brains are mapped into different anatomical components, different structures. We can all study how brains are similar and dissimilar to one another. And within that, you have the pathological space of bad things that can go wrong in it. So there's certainly been a huge amount of work in that space as well. So, in the context of what we already have in our hospital, we have tools for, say, stroke detection. You spoke about MS detection. It's a trial I'm involved in as well at the moment. And indeed, we do a lot of work on brain tumor monitoring for these patients. And it offers that, in fact, coming back to the digital twinning idea, it offers that next level of personalization and precision far beyond what we as clinicians or indeed scientists could offer. Again, me as my clinical hat on, if I were to monitor someone's brain tumor and report their scan, which is what I do on some of my time, sit in a very dark room and look at their images blown up on a huge screen, I'll make an assessment. And then whether that's, say, a tumor is increased by 20% or shrunk by 20%, I'll say bigger or smaller. And I'd be mortified if me or a loved one was treated in that way when we have these technologies at our fingertips, when we can offer this kind of millimeter level of precision with these tools. And so that is very much what we are trying to bring into the hospital through our work at UCL.
Thank you. So Claire was talking earlier about Waymos in San Francisco, and I've been in them as well. And actually, they're driving around London right now as well. And at first you get in one of those vehicles and you're nervous because you think, oh my goodness, there's no driver here. But actually then you start to realize this thing is obeying the road rules much more adherently than any human driver might do, and is very much more observant about what's around you. Is that the same benefit that AI is bringing in imaging? Is it purely a matter of it can spot changes more accurately than a human can do?
I think that's certainly one of the advantages, but it's certainly not the only one. So, it's spotting things that we do not see. That's certainly something we've worked on in brain tumors, where commonly if someone will go for a scan, they have to put a little cannula into their arm and give them some dye. We showed in some of our earlier work that, in fact, there is no need necessarily to put this cannula into their arm if you use an appropriately trained AI system to do so, which particularly if you think of, say, Great Ormond Street, the Children's Hospital, you don't routinely want to be jabbing these small children with needles all the time if you can avoid it. So certainly spotting things that a human could not is one of them. But there are others such as safety, double checking. So that came up in the preamble about the idea of mammogram. These are breast screenings that's reported dually by two human agents. And in fact, the idea that AI systems could replace one of those, then you would halve your waiting times for getting the results of your mammogram, but you would still have that human expert in the loop that checked something. And then, at the operational level, you also have systems that can estimate, when patients need to come for scans. Are they likely to attend their scan, which is another thing in itself. If they're not, you could either intervene to make sure they do for that individual patient, or if they absolutely won't intervene, there is another patient who is definitely waiting for that slot. So there are all sorts of benefits that can, I think, augment our practice, doubtfully replace, but certainly will give a big opportunity to enhance in all those different domains.
Okay, thank you. Rosie, can I just turn to you here now, because you've got a research perspective and a clinical perspective on this. All these wonderful technologies, what does this mean for doctors? Is this a good thing for clinicians? Are we seeing at the end of doctors? Should we be concerned about that? Talk to me about what you think this means for the clinical practice. And we can open this to the rest of the panel as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I can answer this in terms of individual level as an individual doctor, and then for the population. As an individual doctor, I think that this innovation in AI, if it allows us to drive personalised care, it gives us more time, better communication ability, because we're not juggling pattern recognition, data gathering, trying to remember guidelines, trying to, exactly as James has described with the scan situation, it gives us more time with that patient and can drive better outcomes. From the research perspective, as a clinician, I think a clinician can translate the innovation and make sure that actually works in real life, because that's what's important, right, for the clinician, because there's so much talk about innovation and AI and these tools, but does it work for me as a clinician in real life? And does it work for my patient? Because I'm the one delivering it to that patient, and how does it fit? So I think we have to have robust evidence generation and clinical utility and feasibility of these tools. So that's just brief my thoughts for the individual clinician. But on a population level, our healthcare system is struggling. We've all seen the news, and our healthcare is currently facing, it's set up for reactive care, for poor health, ill health. And actually, the world I'm working in with genomics and AI and this innovation, it could shift healthcare from being reactive to proactive. So there is such a benefit to allow, from a population level, to prevent disease, predict disease, so clinicians can then focus on either true prevention and prediction, or unfortunately, when that individual patient is sick and they couldn't prevent the disease, they have a rare disease, they have had an accident, there is nothing they can do, they can really focus on that care. And just to quote, I know I won't go on too long because I've got time and I've got so many figures I could quote, but just to give a stat for the difference it could make, cardiac disease, huge morbidity and mortality for the UK. Our genetic clinical risk tool, modelling on the UK Biobank, we could predict an extra 1.9 additional individuals in the UK at high risk of heart disease. And from those individuals, it's 43,000 deaths we could prevent from statins. So AI and this innovation in the genomic world, not only does it allow identification of hidden risk, it can direct treatment. So back to the population level, you know, if it allows healthcare to move from reactive to preventative, and if it allows clinicians more time for better communication, better decision making, I think it would absolutely transform healthcare and research.
Any other thoughts on that topic? I think it's an important one.
I completely second all of that, and particularly from a sight loss perspective. So, I mean, if we're talking numbers and stuff, like a person starts losing their sight every 6 minutes in the UK, and if you can intervene early, so much of that can be prevented entirely. And our sight is so important to us for our interface with the world and who we are. Our eyes are unique, and I think you can get really kind of romantic about the eyes, but all these technologies can just intercept that much earlier and prevent not just disease, but the progression of disease if it has started. You can select the right treatment plan, and it just means people have a much better outcome overall. And if we think of the AI discussion that we were having a minute ago, patients want clinicians to be doing the things that clinicians should be doing. And they really like the concept of the technology. This isn't just me kind of guessing or saying, we've done research on this, and we published a paper earlier in the year about where AI is acceptable in ophthalmology pathways. And patients are really keen to see the technology adopted. They obviously want checks and balances, and whether it's a human or AI second reader of the images, it doesn't really matter too much. They want to know that the answer is correct, but they want it in a good a good amount of time, and they want to see their clinician still and have that personal connection. None of that's like revolutionary. We've suspected that for a very long time, but we're kind of holding ourselves back in many ways on the adoption of it. I think a little bit out of fear at times.
Yeah, well, I take this moment just to remind folks that we will have time for questions at the end. So if you've got some thoughts or questions, please start formulating them now. So we've just sort of gone from emerging ideas through to how do we get those into clinical practice. And we've talked about this as an ecosystem of research institutes and AI companies and hospitals and so on. Joe, can I come back to you and ask you about that ecosystem situation? With all of this opportunity for innovation to change the way healthcare is delivered, what are the things that we need to get right that we're not currently getting right in that ecosystem?
Okay, I think from and looking at the interesting ideas and innovations that come to us through KQ Labs and come to other acceleration programs as well, I think there are 2 or 3 things that are really important. I think one is that ability to have those interactions to help us nurture those individuals trying to bring those innovations to life. So it's great when there is co-location of all the right pieces, but they need to be brought together. There need to be a real purpose for them to interact. What that means for the innovators could includes things like the investors coming together and actually supporting them and sharing investment into those new ideas, into those businesses. It means working with the hospitals to actually enable the early sort of pilot studies for some of these new technologies to actually take place that are perhaps coming from the research side, as alongside the brilliant innovations that are already coming from my colleagues here in the clinical side of things. So, and then of course it's actually the key question is probably adoption. Actually, one of the things that we tell the companies in KQ Labs is that, really they should be thinking globally at the beginning, at the outset. We have an excellent, system here in the NHS to help pilot and run studies, but actually it's a tiny proportion of the global market and adoption is not quick. So actually many of the companies will perhaps not have, funding in place for the time that it would actually take to be adopted by the NHS. So they're having to think globally, and sadly but truly, and maybe controversially, they perhaps need to think beyond the UK as a market to actually make those innovations happen. So I think if we can be more effective at actually nurturing those ideas and helping them to be adopted, then I think that will go a long way to helping us perhaps be more successful.
Adopted's a simple word and a complicated idea, right? I'm sure everybody here has got some thoughts on that. Anybody want to take a dive at what's it going to take for us to adopt more of this technology into the NHS?
Do you mind if I jump on this? Because I'd like to share an event I was at last week in Parliament, actually, and it was about AI innovation, and we were talking about. I was asked a 5-minute speech on what are the barriers. So the genomic company I work for, we have got through regulations. We have an MHRA regulated device. We've proved evidence of utility. We have robust clinical trials, evidence. We've got regulations. We're working actively with the NHS. We were named in the NHS 10-year plan. So why today, everyone in the room, are you not able to have this test if we have this evidence? What are the barriers? And I named 3. So the first one is the financial architect of the NHS. The NHS, the operational budgets are set up for poor health. So prediction and prevention are competing with sickness. So these tools, we're talking about earlier diagnostics, screening, earlier intervention, it's competing with poor health and sickness. Number 2 was, and James, you can challenge me here a little bit if you'd like, but the frameworks for evaluation of new innovation and tools are set up for diagnostics. Now, diagnostics are typically binary. yes or no. So the scans, they show something, they show a mass, it's there or it's not. In my world of prediction, it's not a yes or no. It's a risk, it's a probability. So if our healthcare regulations and our evaluation frameworks are set up for diagnostics, yes and no, it's difficult to assess the evidence behind them. The third one was about infrastructure of healthcare. The infrastructure of healthcare is set up for episodic care, for this time point when you have this symptom or this sign or this health condition. It's not set up for lifelong. And as I've mentioned already, genetics being unique, that it's static, it's stable throughout your life, it could be used for your whole health journey, for prediction and prevention, but then at a time when you are unfortunately unwell, and allow you to have better diagnostics or dictate, drive which is the best treatment for you. So they're the three I gave last week to the barriers of adoption.
That's pretty thorough, James.
I did it quicker than last week.
Just to jump on that from a slightly more a high level, which I agree with everything that was said. In fact, to come back to something Peter said about fear almost in the healthcare sector, which I think is a really, really important point. Enumerated there are all sorts of regulatory hurdles that are important, but nonetheless massively slow down the progress of moving these things into the clinical front line. The example I gave earlier for stroke detection, that tool, the particular algorithm they used, was actually invented in 1940. That's not to say they've been trying to get it into practice since then, but it just shows, in the AI sector where we've got Demis Hassabis, as was mentioned earlier, they're saying 10 times the speed of the Industrial Revolution, 10 times the gains, 100 times, therefore, the impact. And yet with the speed and the minefield of regulation, just getting these high-level tools into practice is incredibly difficult. But what we, because of fear, because of we don't want to make mistakes, which of course is all vital, but the thing that is almost never considered is that, we have fear over action, fear of putting this stuff, but we don't often have fear of inaction. We don't consider that patients assume they get the very best care, the very most personalised care, but actually are inaction by not putting these high-level performing tools really is doing them a disservice, I think.
There's a really interesting anecdote from my field on this, where there's a researcher, his name's Alistair Dennison, he's phenomenal. He was an AI researcher in ophthalmology and is kind of at the forefront of AI discovery in the UK. And he's fully shifted his career from AI discovery to regulation and adoption because he views that as the biggest limiter for health around AI in the UK. And it's huge for someone to make that decision with their career.
It sure is. One thing that struck me when I was thinking about this was, we're all aware that large language models can be so good at what they do because they have sucked up all the words on the internet, if you like, and data is a fundamental component of that. And for us to be effective in bringing this sort of AI-based or other kinds of preventive interventions, whatever, into the NHS, we're going to also need a good data infrastructure. Does that exist, do you think? Maybe Rosie, we can start with you.
Okay. So in terms of the UK and data, we are leading globally. We have a phenomenal public health sector, the NHS. We have the UK Biobank. We have Our Future Health. We have an opportunity to transform population health with the data. And I think it would be unbelievably disappointing if we don't lead globally. And if we don't get on with it, other nations may beat us to it. So absolutely, the opportunity's there, data's there, for sure.
And the kind of the future investment around data, some of it's there, not all of it, but the Health Data Research Service, which is a Knowledge Quarter win, that's 600 million for further exploitation of NHS data sets and really making sure that health benefits from the kind of really huge data sets that the NHS holds. So I fully support that. And on the Our Future Health part, has everyone heard of Our Future Health?
Anyone not?
There's a couple of hands up. Maybe you should explain.
So Our Future Health, well, So I've taken part. It's the biggest trial of healthy individuals ever in the world. So the ambition is 5 million individuals to have their genotyping, health assessment, and the analysis of their health records to better understand health and disease. And I mean, it's phenomenal. They've recruited 2.5 million and done the early screening of, I think, 2 million now. And it's just incredible. All of us work in domains where genes for those conditions are in the genotyping panel. So I'm really hopeful for the exploitation of those data sets, and researchers are starting to adopt practice with the data as well. Still need 2.5 more million people to take part. It's really easy. You sign up online. You can go to your local Boots and you have the appointment. You get some blood taken. You get a kind of printout of your initial status, and then you have to wait a little while. I still haven't had my my genotyping back, but any day I hope. And things like that are really exciting. I went to the so it was the 1 million patient party last year, and the Peter Carl at the time was Secretary of State, and he was there, and he was like so passionate about it, and saying like this should be on the side of warships in the UK is like the best thing the UK's ever done, and I agree. It's like no one else has come close. Like the biggest thing in the US is like a fraction of the size, and we don't recognize these things as a nation enough, and we don't think about how much potential that data set holds. Sorry, I'm not paid by Our Future Health or anything. I am a partner of theirs, but
no, it's fantastic. The passion is wonderful. Can I bring this back to London a little bit? London is a diverse place with lots of different people in lots of different situations, and the vision, the very optimistic vision that everybody's painting here, might leave some people wondering whether that's going to be something that will benefit everybody. I wonder if, as the last question before we open this to the floor, each of you maybe give me a sense of what you think it's going to be like for a patient in London in this world that we're imagining for the future of healthcare. Let's start with you, James.
Personalised is, I suppose, my one-line answer. You know, it's kind of resonated as a repeating topic throughout this panel. But back in 2019, 2018, we had a cardiologist called Eric Topple from the States come here, meet Secretary of Health at the time, Jeremy Hunt, and convinced him that AI was coming and the NHS was the place to do it. I don't know how many of you work in healthcare, if any of you, but the way that we operate in healthcare is that it's an algorithmic science. You know, ultimately, we don't treat people as individual patients. You are treated as the disease you are allocated to. You've had a heart attack, we give you this many milligrams of this, followed by this, followed by this. You've got a tumor, first we'll try and cut it out, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and so on. But the space that we are now moving to, whether that's with large language models, as you've talked about, or vision models, or foundational models of genomics, or whatever, is just the context that you can absorb all this enormous amount of data about you, because we move to this kind of digital twinning era, is going to open up that possibility to finally be treated as a person and not a disease, I suspect.
Can I just quickly, before we move on, reflect, doesn't that make it very, very expensive? I think of personalized medicine, I think of, you know, individualized cancer therapies that cost a fortune. Just explain why it's not that.
No, I don't think so. I mean, yeah, we think of the buzzword previously for personalized medicine are things like custom developed therapies, but that doesn't necessarily always need to be the case. But in fact, you know, existing NHS procurements of treatments or diagnostics and so on can simply be fine-tuned to the individual. You know, I mentioned earlier on about prediction of whether the patient would even turn up to their appointment. Intervening to make sure that you lower the barriers that they can attend. Perhaps they come from far away, perhaps they need, you know, wheelchair access or hospital transport. These are all individual interventions that personalize them, rather than saying your patient 19 in the cardiology clinic, good luck getting there, sort of thing. And the same goes for, you know, treatments. You know, for tumors, we will often assume we'll have another scan at 6 months, 12 months, blah, blah, blah. This assumes uniform growth, that all cancers grow at exactly the same rate. There are no external factors, and equally responses to treatments and so on. And actually just having the more complex models that can encapsulate that rich data about you just opens up the opportunity to augment those things, rather than, say, building a new molecule. It's using what we have, but personalizing it.
Phew. That's good.
Can I just add in on cost? Treating multiple long-term conditions over time is really expensive. If you can intervene early and prevent, you save a lot of cost. I'll wait my turn for the.
Well, let's turn to Rosie. I think you set her up very nicely.
I was just going to add, I mean, personalised as well is about telling you which drug is the best one for you. And the pharmacogenomics is an evolving area in genetics. So you've unfortunately got high risk of heart disease. There's phenomenal evidence for statins. If I ask people in the room, I know a few will go, I don't want to take a statin, side effects are awful. What if your genetics would tell you which is the one that would be best for you, you'll metabolize the best and reduce side effects? So again, back to you, it'd save the cost, better benefit. So that can be personalized as well, not making a medicine just for that individual, directing care. So back to your question, I'm going to pick for London, I would actually like you not to be a patient. I'm going to go down the prevention route, because we have the genomic analytics truly can predict and prevent disease. So if you can have your routine health assessment, age 40, with your GP and know your risk of heart disease, and if it's found to be high, have an evidence-based treatment, and you don't end up having a cardiac event, you don't become a patient. So I'm going to pick that one because the evidence is there. We have regulations. We're in discussion with the NHS. And I hope we're doing this again next year, and I can be invited to say that you should have all had your appointment.
Jo, you see what's coming down the pipe. What's your vision of how this will be looking like?
I think from some of the companies, from the very early stage ideas that we see at KQ Labs, we see elements of all of these. The other one, along with, prevention and, not being a patient, and if you do happen to be a patient, having a very personalized treatment. I think the other side of it, or another dimension to that, is if you are a patient and you're having personalized treatment, that you don't have to go to hospital for it. You can actually have the benefit of some of these technologies within your own home. I mentioned earlier on the company called Neurovert, who are doing the augmented and extended reality, rehabilitation for stroke patients. That's a device they can wear in their own home and be monitored remotely by the physician caring for them in a very personalized way. If they do happen to be, happen to have the misfortune to actually be a patient when they might not wish to be.
And we do know, just to go back to my obsession with cost, that the most expensive thing you can do is wait till somebody has to get into hospital, right? And so
absolutely.
So Peter, what's your vision here?
I mean, I think Rosie and I are quite similar in, like, health should be health. It shouldn't be sickness. And if people do get sick, I'd love to see a future where there's not a huge burden of engaging in your health and your treatment and understanding what you need. And at the moment, you can have huge gains from all the different technologies and treatments that are in development, but you have to know about them and you have to put a lot of effort into exploring them and engaging with them, it's not accessible to so many people. So I'd really like to see that democratized and available to everyone in London and the whole world, really. I probably should plug something that's happening next year in my job. So the Moorfields UCL Centre for Eye Health is opening next year. It's a new hospital and research and innovation facility, and I think that's really designed in the model of probably the interim step that takes us from where we are now to a future where people live healthily and we truly reap the benefits of preventative medicine. But there is an interim stage that's needed, and this centre really has that ethos of kind of a healthy space where people can go and they engage with their health and their care, but then research on their health in a very unique way is happening in the same building, and it's all connected, and it's kind of an ecosystem within a building that is dedicated to them. So that's what I'd like to see successful soon.
Sounds fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for a really interesting discussion. I think it is an optimistic view. I think we're so used to thinking about the problems with the healthcare system. I think what you're all working on is bringing a brighter future. So we now got an opportunity for you in the audience to ask a few questions of these great folks. There's a microphone roaming around. I will. Let's start. I don't know whether you want me to pick or not, but let's start with the person over the back here.
Do you want me to talk without a microphone? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I am very interested about the healthy aspect of what you're saying. You particularly rounded it up. You know, you want to look at that. Everyone mentioned about preventative. Preventative is cost effective. But one of the things you don't talk a lot about is how that's communicated. Communication of AI and how it's communicated to the people to start being more preventative in their life. It is really key here. And more needs to be said about that, and more needs to be flagged up about that. So to think about how you present that in those terms. Also, that when you're doing preventative, one is a little bit nervous about finding out that you maybe have a propensity to have cancer, you know, with the genomes and stuff. Yeah. So how is that being put in position in terms of it being secure and safe and not being against you in terms of insurance and vulnerability and getting a job, those sorts of things? People are not going to be open and stepping into that without that in place too. So when you're working out those AI systems, that is also key thing to be holistic, because you're talking about being holistic, and that's really, really important as well. It may not have the label of health and medicine on it, but it's so integral to making this happen if you don't think about those aspects.
Thank you. That's a great question. Yeah.
In the conversation too.
Rosie, do you want to start?
I'm ready to jump in actually, because it's an excellent point, and I didn't elaborate when I'm talking about clinical utility and the feasibility. Because with this comes, if you know your genetic risk, what will you do with it, and what will someone else do with it? So I can talk from the world of insurance. Between my clinical days and my genomic, I worked in a private medical insurance. There are clear regulations that in the UK, your private medical insurance cannot use your genetic, they cannot persuade you or enforce you to have genetic testing or disclose it. The only exception is for Huntington's disease for life insurance if you have a policy over 500,000. They are not allowed to ask, and you don't need to disclose. So in terms of our world of genetic testing and health insights, which are our medical device through regulations, the regulations for clinical safety and utility is, what does it mean for the patient in terms of their actions? Can they access treatment? Can they access screening? Does it align with national guidance such as NICE? So we're not giving a risk score and leaving that individual not knowing what they can do or where to turn. They get a detailed report. It's given only by a clinician. It is not consumer facing, so it is clinically supported. It aligns with national guidance. It explains the test in details. We have strict data privacy, so that's made very clear on how long the data is stored for and when it can be removed. So in summary, it has to be actionable. It has to align with national UK medical practice so the individual can access the right care and the right treatment. I hear a lot in my world of, do I want to know my risk? Is it better to know? Is it better to not know? I mean, I can say my first-hand experience as a cardiologist in Glasgow when I was treating many 35-year-olds with their second heart attack. My coronary care was full. I never had anyone aged over 60. Almost everyone would want to know. But then with that disease, there is evidence-based treatment and actions. If it's a different disease, then maybe not. So that comes to ethics and trust. That was a long answer.
Thank you. That was. We've got a few. There are a few other. I apologise. I want to make sure we get through. Yeah.
In London, our ethnic mix, because all of this is very kind of white, and not
I'm-
ethics.
I'm going to jump on that very, very quickly.
Make it
Do you
short
mind-
because we've got to get other
sorry,
people
so
in.
for future health, that's so the UK Biodank, there we hear about bias, and with AI, innovation, genetics, there is bias. Our future health, 5 million people, it's going to transform in terms of ethnic minorities and diversity. So everyone has a part to play for that population health.
Claire, go ahead.
So, thank you. You asked a great question about communication, and I want to hate to be a doom monger here, but I also want to pick up on the fear thing. So there's a lot of people who are terrified of AI, and this comes back to the communication. But if you look at what's happening in the United States right now, if you build a data center, you now have massive protests to stop them. And you have 8 states in the United States that have actually banned data centers. And a lot of people are saying that's going to be the bottleneck on AI development. So my question is how this relates to you guys is there's a lot of fear here. And there's a lot of people who think Palantir, for example, is like the evil incarnate and is out to take all our data. And I know there are even clinicians who are saying they don't, within the NHS, who may not want to work it. I don't know if people here all know who Palantir is, but that's my question to you guys. How do we overcome the fear? And how do we overcome specifically the fear of AI companies? And I'm just citing Palantir as one. I don't have any particular bias towards them. Just.
Does anybody fancy taking that? I'm going to nominate you, James.
I could
Spoken alone.
I could take the AI fear certainly at the start, in that we fear what we do not know, as certainly do I. You know, some 6-7 years ago, before I had moved into this domain, you know, what the hell is this that everyone's sort of talking about? But actually, when communicated properly, I think it opens an enormous potential for people to actually be very excited about it. Obviously, there are people who are skeptical about it, whether that's in data retention or use in, say, insurance, as came up earlier. But equally, there is a totally different arm of patients that, when they have been, you know, educated or taught on the opportunities from this, totally change their perceptions. You know, I can speak to some of our work we do on tumours, and as part of that, we do a lot of kind of patient outreach to speak to these patients. What do they want, so that we build systems for them, not just for us as clinicians. And indeed, you know, when we suggest, you know, systems that can, you know, personalise their care, speed up their waiting times, offer interventions for, you know, sooner scanning if required, blah, blah, blah. You know, their questions are usually, why do we not have this already? Because they expect the best care. They might just not know that that might be achieved by AI. And so often I think the kind of education at the high level will change that. I think as a society, we have a lot of fear of AI because it's all on our Twitter feeds about how we're all going to, you know, go under from AI in the near future. We've got, you know, Claude Mythos or whatever it's calling banks, isn't it, in the Senate, I think, at the moment, because of the security vulnerabilities in banking and so on. But actually, yes, these tools are very powerful, possibly dangerous in certain circumstances. There is enormous potential if done right. And I think that's really where the opportunities for patients to transform their kind of fear into one of excitement might come about as well.
Definitely a topic for more conversation over drinks. There's a question just here in the front. I think we've got one or two more. Yep.
My question is about primary care as it relates to what you're doing. And there's quite a revolution going on in that across, say, London or other metropolitan centres in terms of digital first. So that includes a bit of ML, it might include a bit of AI. But the problem that I see as a pensioner is that we're losing contact with the clinicians by losing personalised contact with the clinicians. That over a phone you can't see what a patient looks like or what they're feeling, and basically what I'm talking about, whether it's at primary care or at acute level, is how do you deploy these technologies so that they become more sentient in their delivery?
Peter, do you want to have a go at that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really interesting the way you ended there, saying make the technologies more sentient.
Well, basically,
in their delivery.
How do humans work with the technology so that the technology doesn't overtake the essential human?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think ultimately it's a case of letting the technology be technology and do what it's best at, and making sure that humans are doing what humans are best at. And I don't think this is happening uniformly or kind of correctly in that many ways at the moment. But there's a program of work that I've been working on for quite a few years now, looking at how do we basically engage the primary care setting to better deliver clinical trials, research, and care as a complete package, and making sure that research and better understanding your own condition, enhanced by data and AI and things like Our Future Health and all these data sets that we know about. But how can you make sure that that is in the location that you want to access it in? So in your community, on the high street. For us, that would potentially be your local optician. But going there and having that face-to-face time with a human to understand your unique perspective on not just a condition that you might have, but your own life. And that's really what I'd like to see for the future, is that really community connected research and care environment that is human focused, and the technology enables it. It's not replaced by technology.
In a sense, this could change the nature of what, say, how primary care practice operates, in the sense that it might not just have clinicians in it, it might have lawyers in it, etc. Because you're taking a more holistic approach to what the patient's needs are.
Absolutely. I think, well, that's kind of Claire's big thing, is community-based healthy environments and expertise and everything all encompassing. So there's lots to talk about there.
We are a little bit past our time, but let's take one more question, if that's all right, and then we'll call it a night.
Very conveniently, I can pick up on this community point, and I'm very interested in what Rosie was saying about prevention, also about innovation. It so happens that the charity that I founded works with people within their communities to bring about change. We provide much of the kind of things that you do around the incubation of your projects. And very recently, we have indeed been looking at this area, and we did a capacity study to determine the potential of people within their own communities to contribute to neighborhood health services. Now, I'm not particularly talking about AI here, but I'm wondering whether we're not missing a big resource here. And that is, if you like, the human bottom-up contribution. Think of the pandemic, when the spontaneous ability of groups and all kinds of collaborations for mutual support, for innovation around health and self-help. And I'm wondering whether there isn't something to be said, or whether you have things to say about what that contribution of people, not just patients, to this process might be as a resource.
Yeah, it's a great question. This is an ecosystem of people as well as an ecosystem of technologies and systems. Does anybody have a thought? Joe, did you have a thought?
Just very quickly, I have to say that for me, that one of
Maybe just take the microphone.
Thank you. Sorry. For me, one of the things that most fascinates me actually about entrepreneurship is the human side of it, and that individual motivation and passion to make that happen. And I think you're right. The grassroots have a huge role to play, and working in concert with the experts. The folks like my esteemed panelists who are experts in their own field. And I have come across organisations in the past where actually that patient engagement and that public engagement is really, really critical. So I'm absolutely for that. I think actually it's a huge entrepreneurship is a human endeavour. It's not a technology thing. It's a human endeavour behind it.
Well, I'm sorry. I think we're going to have to. Maybe you can ask these folks afterwards during the drinks, but we are at time. A really great conversation. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for those great questions. The London Society and the Knowledge Quarter, great job putting this session on. I think it was a really important topic and a well-selected panel. So please, everybody, join me in thanking Peter, Joe, Rose, James. Over to you.
speak into the cube. Hopefully you can hear me. Please feel free to help yourself to more drinks at the bar. We only have a limited amount of time, so it's fully serviced, so please help yourself. And also thank you so much to all of our panelists. Everyone seated here today works in the Knowledge Quarter, which I think it demonstrates the real depth of talent and skill and expertise in life sciences that exists here in the cluster. So thank you very much again. And please enjoy, ask questions, meet each other. Thank you.